alien visitors, atomic panic, invisible monsters, doomed worlds, and a trip to the moon before the real one even happened. The 1950s were one hell of a decade for sci-fi, so for the next few minutes, we're heading back to that era. Let's start with the day the Earth stood still. It's visually stunning, sure, but it's the themes that really make it stick. The story kicks off with a flying saucer landing right in the middle of Washington. When a humanoid alien named Klaatu steps out, the military panics and shoots him, instantly triggering his massive robot, Gort, to attack until the visitor stops him. Klaatu has an urgent message for Earth's leaders, but the government treats him like a high-security prisoner instead. He eventually escapes, hides in plain sight, and forms a bond with a young woman and her son while evading the authorities. Back in '51, the wow factor was the effects, that iconic ship and Gort. But the film endured because of the ideas behind the spectacle. The government's violent reaction to the visitor becomes a sharp mirror to our own tendency toward war, all of it culminating in that final warning about galactic diplomacy and Bernard Herrmann's haunting score. By the time Destination Moon hit theaters in 1950, the arms race was in full swing. The US had just lost its nuclear monopoly, and the political anxiety is baked right into the script. After a satellite project explodes on launch, leaving everyone wondering if it was an accident or sabotage, American industry rushes to put a man on the moon. The film even stops to explain the actual science to the audience using an extended, animated presentation featuring Woody Woodpecker. It's a bit surreal, but it makes the tech feel possible. The stakes, however, are purely political. The characters explicitly state that the first country to launch missiles from the moon will control the entire Earth. Now, there's a lot of technical mansplaining at the start, but once they actually take off, the film becomes a visual marvel. The moonscapes and the spacewalk sequences feel like a 1950s version of Gravity. While the human drama in the finale is mostly borrowed from Fritz Lang's Woman in the Moon, the practical effects were so impressive they actually earned the film an Oscar. It's a fascinating mix of patriotic jingoism and genuine, high-budget craft. When Worlds Collide also won an Oscar for its special effects, and it wastes no time putting the entire Earth on a literal collision course with doom. The setup is pure disaster movie gold. A newly discovered star and a nearby planet are hurtling toward us, and a plan is hatched to build a space ark to transport a select group of survivors to safety. Naturally, when the scientists take this to the UN, they're met with skepticism and friction. It eventually takes private financiers to get the mission off the ground, literally, designing a ship meant to carry a select group of survivors to safety. Based on the 1933 novel, this film sits right alongside The Day the Earth Stood Still as a pillar of the golden age of sci-fi. Sure, it's a bit dated now, but it's packed with tension and intrigue. It's essentially the grandfather of the modern disaster flick. You can see its DNA in every end-of-the-world blockbuster that's come out since. Directed by Jack Arnold and written by Richard Matheson, The Incredible Shrinking Man follows Scott Carey, who is exposed to a strange radioactive mist while out on a boat. At first, nothing happens, but then he realizes he's actually getting shorter. As he keeps shrinking, doctors have no answers at first, and Scott starts to lose it. He becomes bitter and lashes out at his wife, all while turning into a national curiosity. The movie is really a tragedy about a man losing his identity. By the time he's shrinking down toward the infinitesimal, he finds this strange, beautiful bit of hope. Smaller than the smallest, I meant something too. To God, there is no zero. I still exist. The effects are great, but the reason it's a masterpiece is that it asks big, scary questions about what it even means to be human. This one is a childhood favorite. and the charm still holds up. The story begins in Edinburgh, where Professor Oliver Lindenbrook discovers a hidden message inside a piece of volcanic rock and sets off for Iceland, convinced it contains directions to the center of the Earth. Soon he's heading underground with his student Alec, a widow determined to protect her late husband's reputation, and a stoic guide who, for some reason, also brings a duck. The filmmakers were clearly proud of those massive widescreen images, even if some of the effects look pretty dated. Let's be real, an iguana is still an iguana, no matter what you glue to its back. But the spirit of adventure is still very much there. It's impressive how seriously the film plays all this, despite the odd musical detour. James Mason and Pat Boone make for solid leads, even if they both occasionally get upstaged by that duck. Produced by Charles Brackett, who co-wrote the screenplay with Walter Reich, the film can sometimes feel like a lighter, more playful cousin to Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But the sheer energy, the bizarre set pieces, and the constant sense of movement give it an appeal that's hard to resist. And since we mentioned 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, the best compliment you can pay this film is that it actually does justice to the book's sense of exploration. It's tied to the episodic structure of the novel, which makes it feel a bit uneven at times, but the final product is impressive. Kirk Douglas is great here, leaning into a joyous goofiness as Ned Land. On the flip side, James Mason's Captain Nemo is a much more psychological performance. One brings the charisma, the other brings the intensity. The lavish sets and costumes put you right inside the Nautilus, and the camera work makes the whole underwater world feel huge. Taking its name from the Herbert George Wells classic, The War of the Worlds is still arguably the best adaptation we've ever gotten. It resets the story from Victorian England to 1950s California, beginning with what seems to be a meteor crashing near a small town before the Martian invasion reveals itself. At first, it's just curiosity until the heat rays start firing. Once the Martians begin destroying everything, the military moves in, and nuclear scientist Clayton Forrester is thrown into a desperate fight for survival. Now, people usually point to Spielberg's remake when they want spectacle, but that version uses CGI as a total crutch. It gets so buried under cumbersome action and cliches that it completely loses the sense of wonderment found in the original novel. It's hard to appreciate the actual concept of an alien invasion when you can't see past the computer-generated flashiness taking up the whole screen. The 1953 version doesn't have that problem. Those Technicolor manta ray ships have an eerie physical presence that's hard to match. Plus, it actually explores the clash between religion and warfare, making it much more than just a loud disaster film. Them is the absolute peak of the big bug movies that flooded the 50s. It kicks off with one of the best openings in the genre, a little girl wandering the New Mexico desert in total shock. When she finally snaps out of it, she just screams, What's interesting is that it plays out more like a police procedural. It follows the discovery of a nest of giant radiated ants, a direct byproduct of early atomic testing in New Mexico. While it eventually turns into a city under siege thriller in the sewers beneath Los Angeles, the film is actually at its strongest in the barren isolation of the desert. The effects might not be nightmare fuel by today's standards, but the film is smart enough to rely on atmosphere. It Came from Outer Space tells you everything you need to know about its vibe in the first few seconds. You get the eerie score, the splashy title font, and that meteor-like object tearing into the Arizona desert. Based on an original treatment by Ray Bradbury, the film then reveals its smartest twist. The aliens are not conquerors at all, but a peaceful species stranded here by accident. Naturally, they're still met with nothing but fear and hostility from the locals. What's really unusual for 1953 is that we actually get to see things through the alien's eyes a few times. It's an extremely powerful move because it strips away the menace. Instead of feeling threatened, we're essentially participating in how they experience the strangeness of a foreign planet, which in this case is our own. It's the classic story of a misunderstood hero who recognizes a truth that everyone else refuses to acknowledge, not the trigger-happy law enforcement, the press, or the townspeople. It all builds to that great Richard Carlson moment about imagination and our stubborn refusal to let new ideas into our heads.
I do know I expected you to be more open to the idea than the others. You're a man of science.
And therefore less inclined to witchcraft, John.
Not witchcraft, Dr. Snell. Imagination. Willingness to believe that there are lots of things that we don't know anything about. Look, there was a time when people thought the Earth was a level plain between two mountains that were set there to hold up the sky, and that the stars were lamps hung from that sky. Then a better idea came along and people were willing to listen.
Even though Christian Nyby got the official credit, a lot of people have long argued that Howard Hawks was the real guiding force behind The Thing from Another World. The style feels so unmistakably Hawksian that it's hard not to see his hand in it. Whether you see it as a Hawks film or not, the sci-fi is really just the surface. This isn't just a monster movie. It's a film about how a group of people reacts when they're trapped together under pressure. Interestingly, the real tension doesn't even come from the monster itself. It comes from a clash of ideologies. You have Captain Hendry facing off against Dr. Carrington, a scientist whose obsession with discovery puts everyone in mortal danger. To Carrington, the alien is a breakthrough. To the rest of the crew, it's a lethal threat. And sure, John Carpenter's remake might be more famous today, but the 1951 original is still a blast. It keeps a genuinely creepy atmosphere and has some absolutely priceless dialogue. If I had to keep just one sci-fi film from the 1950s, it would be Forbidden Planet. The setup feels familiar because, well, everyone eventually copied it. Commander Adams, played by a young Leslie Nielsen, leads a military crew to the planet Altair 4. They're looking for survivors from a previous mission, but all they find is a scientist named Morbius, his daughter Altera, and the iconic Robbie the Robot. Morbius gives them a very clear warning: get out. He wants them away from the planet, and more importantly, away from his daughter. But the crew sticks around, and pretty soon, they're being hunted by an invisible, unstoppable creature. The script actually pulls a lot of its DNA from Shakespeare's The Tempest, but the vibe is pure Jules Verne. Directing-wise, Fred M. Wilcox basically built the blueprint for the next 20 years of pop culture. You don't get Star Trek or Lost in Space without this film. It's the absolute peak of that polished, post-war futurist aesthetic. And sure, the posters made it look like a trendy monster flick, and later on, things like the Rocky Horror Picture Show turned it into a bit of a camp classic. But don't let that fool you. Beneath the vibrant colors, this is smart, serious science fiction.